If you've ever stepped inside a gym, you've probably heard someone say, "Want to build muscle? Want to get stronger? Want to improve recovery? Take creatine." At this point, creatine has become so common that many people treat it like protein powder. But what exactly is creatine? Why do elite athletes, bodybuilders, powerlifters, wrestlers, MMA fighters, arm wrestlers, football players, and Olympic athletes use it? And perhaps the biggest question, how can one supplement remain at the top of sports nutrition recommendations after more than 30 years of scientific investigation? Today, we're diving into one of the most researched supplements ever studied. Not fitness influencer opinions, not supplement company marketing, but actual science. By the end of this video, you'll understand what creatine is, how it works, where it comes from, which foods contain it, why supplementation works, whether it's safe, which form is best, what creatinine actually is, and whether creatine deserves its legendary reputation. Let's begin. What is creatine? Contrary to what many people believe, creatine is not a drug. It is not a steroid. It is not a hormone. It is a naturally occurring compound found inside the human body. Your body actually manufactures creatine every day. The primary organs involved are liver, kidneys. Pancreas. Creatine is synthesized from 3 amino acids: glycine, arginine, methionine. Every day your body produces approximately 1 to 2 grams of creatine. Then another 1 to 2 grams may come from food. The average 70-kilogram adult stores approximately 120 to 140 grams of creatine, with about 95% stored inside skeletal muscle. That fact is extremely important, because creatine's entire performance-enhancing reputation comes from what it does inside muscle cells. Where is creatine found naturally? One of the biggest misconceptions is that creatine is artificial. In reality, humans have been consuming creatine for thousands of years. The richest sources are beef, pork, lamb, salmon, tuna, herring, cod. For example, 1 kilogram of beef contains roughly 4 to 5 grams of creatine. 1 kilogram of salmon contains approximately 4 to 5 grams. This immediately creates a problem. Most people are not eating a kilogram of beef every day, which is why supplementation became popular. Vegetarians and vegans often have lower creatine stores because they consume little or no dietary creatine. Research consistently shows that vegetarians often experience larger responses to supplementation because their baseline stores are lower. Why does the body need creatine? Now we reach the most important concept in this entire video: energy. Every movement you make requires ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the body's energy currency. Without ATP, muscles cannot contract, nerves cannot fire, the brain cannot function. The problem is that ATP stores are extremely small. If your body relied only on stored ATP, maximal effort exercise would stop within seconds. So the body developed backup energy systems. One of those systems is the phosphocreatine system. And this is where creatine becomes incredibly important. The ATP system explained. Imagine you're attempting a maximum deadlift, or exploding into a wrestling shot, or hitting an arm wrestling side pressure, or just a flash pin surge, or throwing a knockout punch. These explosive efforts require immediate energy. The phosphocreatine system provides it. Inside muscle cells, creatine combines with phosphate. This forms phosphocreatine. When ATP is depleted, phosphocreatine rapidly donates its phosphate group. ADP becomes ATP again, and energy production continues. This happens almost instantly. This is why creatine is especially useful during heavy lifting, sprinting, wrestling exchanges, explosive sports, power movements. Creatine is essentially helping your body recharge ATP faster. That is the foundation of almost every performance benefit associated with supplementation. Why supplementation works if our body already produces creatine? Why supplement? Because muscle stores are not fully saturated. Most people operate below maximum creatine capacity. Supplementation increases intramuscular creatine stores. More stored creatine means more phosphocreatine, faster ATP regeneration, better repeated high-intensity performance. This doesn't turn someone into a superhero, but it can improve performance enough to create meaningful training advantages over time. and those small advantages accumulate. The research revolution. Creatine exploded into public awareness during the 1990s. Scientists began conducting controlled trials. The results surprised many researchers. Study after study demonstrated improvements in strength, lean mass power output, repeated sprint performance, resistance training adaptations. What made creatine unique was consistency. Most supplements fail scientific testing. Creatine repeatedly passed. This is one reason organizations like the International Society of Sports Nutrition consider creatine one of the most effective and well-researched sports supplements available. Does creatine build muscle? This is where many people get confused. Creatine does not directly build muscle like anabolic steroids. Instead, it creates conditions that support muscle growth. For example, if creatine helps you perform 1 extra repetition or 5 extra pounds on a lift, those improvements accumulate over months. The result? Greater training stimulus, greater adaptation, greater muscle growth. Creatine may also increase cellular hydration. Muscle cells become more hydrated. This creates an environment favorable for anabolic signaling. In simple terms, creatine helps create better conditions for muscle growth. The actual muscle is still built through training and nutrition. Creatine and the brain. Most people think creatine is only for muscles. That is no longer true. Researchers are increasingly interested in creatine's role in cognition, brain energy metabolism, neuroprotection, aging. The brain also uses ATP, and the brain also contains creatine. Emerging research suggests supplementation may benefit sleep deprivation, cognitive fatigue, mental performance under stress, but it represents one of the most exciting frontiers in creatine research. Why athletes love creatine? At first glance, creatine seems simple. More ATP, more energy, better performance. But elite athletes don't care about supplements because they work once. They care because they work every single day. The greatest advantage of creatine isn't what it does in one workout. It's what it does over months. Imagine 2 athletes. Both train equally hard. Both follow identical programs. Both eat the same diet. The only difference? One athlete consistently performs 1 extra rep, 2 extra reps, slightly more volume, slightly more intensity, day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually, those tiny advantages become enormous. That is why creatine became one of the most successful supplements in sports history. Creatine for arm wrestling. Let's start with one of the fastest growing strength sports in the world, arm wrestling. Arm wrestling isn't just about arm strength. Elite pullers require hand strength, finger strength, wrist strength, tendon strength, forearm, endurance, explosive force production. Most arm wrestling matches are decided within seconds, and those first few seconds rely heavily on the ATP-PC system. Exactly the energy system creatine supports. This means creatine may improve explosive start side pressure generation back pressure, repeated table efforts, training volume. One major advantage is training recovery. Arm wrestlers often perform heavy static holds table practice, pulley training, finger containment exercises. Creatine may help maintain training quality throughout these sessions. For arm wrestlers, creatine is arguably one of the most useful legal supplements available. Creatine for powerlifting. Now let's move to powerlifting. Powerlifting consists of squat, bench press, deadlift, 3 lifts, maximum force, maximum intensity, minimal time. This is precisely the environment where the phosphocreatine system dominates. Research consistently demonstrates improvements in maximal strength power, output, training volume, resistance training performance. This is why creatine became almost universal among serious powerlifters. Imagine adding 1 extra rep, 1 additional set, slightly heavier loads over years of training. Those small improvements compound into significantly greater strength adaptations. Many strength coaches consider creatine a foundational supplement, not because it's dramatic, because it's reliable. Creatine for Olympic weightlifting. Olympic weightlifting is different. Success depends on speed, power coordination, explosiveness, timing, the snatch, the clean and jerk. Both demand incredible force production in fractions of a second. Research suggests creatine may improve peak power output, explosive strength, repeated high-intensity efforts. This is particularly important during heavy training blocks, multiple training sessions, high-volume technical work. Olympic lifting athletes often benefit from anything that improves explosive energy production. Creatine directly targets that energy system. Creatine for wrestling. Wrestling is brutal. Athletes require strength, power, endurance, grip strength, repeated explosive efforts. Unlike powerlifting, wrestling isn't one maximal lift. It's repeated bursts of effort, over and over, throughout an entire match. Creatine helps because every takedown attempt, every scramble, every explosive bridge, every shot uses ATP. The ability to regenerate ATP faster may help maintain performance throughout intense competition. Research has shown creatine can improve repeated sprint and repeated high-intensity performance. This is particularly relevant for combat sports. Creatine for MMA. Mixed martial arts may be one of the most physically demanding sports on earth. Athletes need power, endurance, reaction time, recovery. Explosiveness. A single fight may involve striking exchanges, grappling, wrestling, clinch work, takedowns, all requiring repeated explosive effort. Creatine may support power generation, recovery between exchanges, repeated effort performance, training intensity. Importantly, creatine does not make someone a better fighter. Technique wins fights, but improved physical preparation can support better training, and better training produces better fighters. Creatine for boxing. Many people think creatine is only for strength sports. Research suggests otherwise. Boxing requires speed, explosiveness, reaction time, repeated effort output. Every punch begins with explosive force production. ATP fuels that process. Creatine helps replenish ATP. This may support punching power, repeated combinations, high-intensity intervals. However, boxers must manage body weight carefully. Some athletes notice temporary water retention when starting creatine. This becomes important during weight-cutting phases. Creatine for track and field athletes. The effects depend on the event. For sprinters, creatine may be extremely useful because sprinting relies heavily on ATP and phosphocreatine. For endurance athletes, benefits are more variable. Long-distance events rely primarily on different energy systems. However, some endurance athletes may still benefit through strength improvements, recovery support, training quality. The effects simply aren't as dramatic as in power sports. Does creatine help recovery? This is one of the most misunderstood topics. Creatine is not primarily a recovery supplement, but it may support recovery indirectly. Research suggests creatine may help reduce exercise-induced muscle damage, improve glycogen replenishment support, cellular hydration, improve training quality. This doesn't mean soreness disappears, but it may help athletes maintain performance across multiple sessions. For elite athletes, that's extremely valuable. Does creatine build muscle or just water? This question appears everywhere online. Let's separate myth from reality. When people begin taking creatine, water retention often increases. But this water is largely stored inside muscle cells. This is called intracellular water retention. This is very different from bloating, puffiness, subcutaneous water. The initial weight gain is often water. However, long-term research consistently shows increases in lean body mass strength training adaptations. The muscle gains are real. The water gain is simply part of the process. Why some people don't respond. Not everyone experiences dramatic results. Scientists call these individuals non-responders. Why? Several factors influence response. Baseline creatine stores, muscle mass, diet, genetics, training status. Vegetarians often respond exceptionally well because their creatine stores are lower. Someone already consuming large amounts of meat may notice smaller changes. This doesn't mean creatine isn't working. It simply means they started closer to saturation. At this point, a clear pattern emerges. Creatine consistently benefits activities that rely on power, explosiveness, strength, repeated high-intensity effort, which explains why it became popular. But perhaps the most surprising part of the creatine story is still ahead. Because the internet is filled with myths. Does creatine damage kidneys? Does it cause hair loss? Does it make you bald? Does it dehydrate you? What's the difference between creatine and creatinine? And with so many forms available, monohydrate, ethyl ester, buffered creatine, crealkaline nitrate, the biggest creatine myths on the internet. If you search for creatine online, you'll quickly find two completely opposite camps. One group says, creatine is the greatest supplement ever created. The other says, creatine destroys your kidneys, causes hair loss, dehydrates you, and makes you bloated. So who's right? Let's look at what decades of research actually show. Myth 1. Creatine damages the kidneys. This is probably the most common myth, and it originated because of confusion between creatine and creatinine. These are not the same thing. We'll discuss creatinine shortly. Hundreds of studies have examined creatine supplementation. In healthy individuals, research consistently demonstrates no evidence that recommended creatine supplementation causes kidney damage. This has been one of the most extensively investigated topics in sports nutrition. Major reviews and ISSN position stands continue to support the safety of creatine monohydrate in healthy populations. Important note, people with pre-existing kidney disease should always consult a physician before using any supplement. But for healthy individuals, the creatine destroys kidneys claim is not supported by current evidence. Myth 2. Creatine causes hair loss. This myth exploded because of one small study. The study suggested increased DHT levels in rugby players. DHT is a hormone associated with male pattern baldness. Since then, social media has repeated the claim endlessly. However, multiple reviews examining creatine supplementation have found no direct evidence that creatine causes hair loss. Current scientific evidence does not establish a causal relationship between creatine use and baldness. If someone is genetically predisposed to male pattern baldness, hormones may influence that process. But the claim that creatine directly causes hair loss remains unproven. Myth 3. Creatine dehydrates you. This myth was popular in the early 2000s. Scientists were concerned because creatine increases intracellular water. Many assumed dehydration would follow. Research found the opposite. Many studies show creatine users maintain hydration normally. Some research even suggests improved thermoregulation and hydration status during exercise. Modern evidence does not support the claim that creatine causes dehydration. Myth 4. Creatine is a steroid. This one is simple. Creatine is not an anabolic steroid. Creatine is a naturally occurring compound found in beef, fish, pork, human muscle tissue. Its mechanism is completely different from anabolic steroids. What is creatinine? Now let's discuss one of the most misunderstood topics. Creatinine. Creatine and creatinine sound similar, but they are not the same thing. Creatinine is a breakdown product. As creatine performs its functions inside muscle cells, a small amount naturally converts into creatinine. Your kidneys filter creatinine from the blood. This is why doctors often use blood creatinine levels as a marker of kidney function. Here's the important part. When someone supplements creatine, creatinine levels may increase slightly. This does not automatically mean kidney damage. It may simply reflect increased creatine metabolism. This distinction is extremely important. Many people panic after seeing elevated creatinine without understanding the difference. Types of creatine available today. Walk into a supplement store and you'll see creatine monohydrate, creatine, HCl buffered creatine, crealkaline creatine, ethyl ester creatine, nitrate, magnesium, creatine, chelate, liquid creatine, multi-creatine blends. Supplement companies often market these products as stronger, faster, better absorbed, superior to monohydrate. But what does research actually say? Creatine monohydrate. This is the gold standard. Why? Because most studied, most proven, most effective, most affordable, more than 3 decades of research support creatine monohydrate. Most scientific studies investigating creatine use monohydrate. When scientists say creatine works, they are usually talking about creatine monohydrate. This is extremely important, because many newer products try to piggyback on monohydrate's reputation. Creatine HCl, creatine hydrochloride, became popular because companies claimed better absorption, less bloating, lower doses required. The reality? Research remains limited compared to monohydrate. Current evidence has not demonstrated superior muscle gains, strength gains, or performance outcomes compared to creatine monohydrate. Can HCl work? Yes. Is it proven superior? No. Creatine ethyl ester. This form generated massive hype. Supplement companies promised superior uptake, enhanced effectiveness. Research eventually showed disappointing results. Several studies found ethyl ester was not superior to monohydrate. In fact, some data suggest it may be less effective. Today, it has largely disappeared from serious sports nutrition discussions. Buffered creatine. KRE alkaline. The claim: better stability, better absorption, no loading required. Scientific studies comparing buffered creatine to monohydrate generally found no significant advantage. Again, can it work? Yes. Is it better? Current evidence says no. Creatine nitrate. This combines creatine with nitrate compounds. Potential benefits include blood flow support, pump enhancement. Interesting concept. But research remains limited compared to monohydrate. Liquid creatine, one of the least impressive forms. Creatine becomes unstable in solution over time. This can reduce effectiveness. Most experts prefer powder. Which creatine should you buy? This is the answer most people came for. After reviewing decades of literature, the best choice remains creatine monohydrate. Not because it's flashy, not because it's trendy, because it has the strongest evidence, the best safety profile, the lowest cost, the highest research support. What to look for when buying creatine. Instead of focusing on fancy marketing, look for creatine monohydrate. Third-party testing, reputable manufacturer, minimal ingredients, transparent labeling, no proprietary blends, independent quality certification. Examples include certifications from NSF, Certified for Sport, Informed Sport, USP verification. What should you avoid? Be cautious of products claiming 10x stronger than monohydrate, no water retention, ever instant muscle growth, superior absorption without evidence. Most of these claims are marketing, not science. Creatine and aging. One of the most exciting areas of modern research involves aging. Scientists are investigating creatine's effects on muscle preservation, sarcopenia, cognition, fall prevention, healthy aging. As people age, ATP production declines. Muscle mass declines. Strength declines. Creatine may help support healthy aging when combined with resistance training. This is one reason researchers are increasingly interested in creatine beyond athletics. Creatine and the brain. This may be the future of creatine research. Scientists are investigating potential applications in cognitive performance, sleep deprivation, concussion, recovery, neurodegenerative disease, mental fatigue. The brain consumes enormous amounts of energy. Creatine plays a role in cellular energy systems there too. Research is ongoing, but the findings are extremely promising. Creatine dosage. What does the science actually say? One of the biggest reasons creatine has remained popular for more than 30 years is that researchers have largely agreed on how much is needed to saturate muscle stores. Unlike many supplements, creatine dosing is remarkably straightforward. Option 1. The fastest method, loading phase. The International Society of Sports Nutrition, ISSN, Australian Institute of Sport, and multiple review papers recommend a loading protocol of 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight per day for 5 to 7 days. For example, for 60 kilos athlete, 18 grams per day for 70 kilos athlete, 21 grams per day for 80 kilos athlete, 24 grams per day for 90 kilo athlete, 27 grams per day for 100 kilos athlete, 30 grams per day. This dose is usually divided into 4 to 5 smaller servings throughout the day. The purpose is simple: rapidly saturate muscle creatine stores. Research shows this can increase intramuscular creatine levels by approximately 20 to 40% within a week. Option 2. The no-loading approach. Many athletes skip loading completely. Instead, they take 3 to 5 grams daily every day. This method reaches similar muscle saturation levels, but takes approximately 3 to 4 weeks instead of 5 to 7 days. The end result is essentially the same. Loading simply gets you there faster, Maintenance dose. Once muscles are saturated, most research recommends 3 to 5 grams per day for the average person. Larger athletes with greater muscle mass may benefit from 5 to 10 grams per day to maintain saturation. Body weight-based formula. Many sports scientists prefer this formula. Maintenance dose equals 0.03 grams per kilogram per day. Examples: for 60 kilograms athlete, 1.8 grams per day. For 70 kg athlete, 2.1 grams per day. For 80 kg athlete, 2.4 grams per day. For 90 kilograms athlete, 2.7 grams per day. For 100 kilograms athlete, 3 grams per day. In practice, most athletes simply take 3 to 5 grams daily because it is convenient and effective. What about elite athletes? For athletes with very high muscle mass, multiple daily training sessions, professional-level training volumes, research suggests maintenance requirements may be somewhat higher than average gym goers. Some position stands note that larger athletes may require 5 to 10 grams per day to maintain fully saturated stores. Examples: professional bodybuilders, elite powerlifters, strongman competitors, heavyweight wrestlers, elite arm wrestlers, professional football players. However, more is not necessarily better. Once muscle stores are saturated, taking excessive amounts does not continue increasing muscle creatine levels. Is there an ideal time to take creatine? Research suggests consistency matters far more than timing. The most important factor is taking creatine every day. Some studies suggest consuming creatine with meals containing carbohydrates and protein may slightly improve retention because insulin can enhance muscle creatine uptake. But the difference is relatively small compared to simply taking it consistently. Should you cycle creatine? One of the oldest gym myths is that creatine must be cycled. Current scientific evidence does not support mandatory cycling. Research has reported long-term use at recommended doses to be safe and well tolerated in healthy individuals, with studies even examining much higher intakes in clinical settings. There is no strong evidence that healthy athletes need to come off creatine periodically. The final scientific recommendation: if you want the simplest evidence-based protocol, take 5 grams of creatine monohydrate every day. That's it. No complicated cycles. No proprietary formulas. No expensive blends. No special timing requirements. For most people, 5 grams daily of creatine monohydrate remains the protocol supported by the largest body of scientific evidence in sports nutrition. Final verdict: after more than 30 years of scientific investigation, one conclusion is remarkably clear. Creatine is not the most powerful supplement ever created, but it may be the most reliable. It doesn't promise miracles. It doesn't produce overnight transformations. It won't replace hard training, good nutrition, quality sleep, but it consistently helps improve strength, power, training volume, recovery, muscle growth potential, and perhaps most importantly, it does so with one of the strongest safety records in sports nutrition. That combination is rare. Very few supplements can claim hundreds of studies, decades of research, widespread athletic use, strong safety data, consistent effectiveness. Creatine can. And that is why, after all these years, it remains one of the most recommended supplements in sports science. If you enjoyed this evidence-based breakdown of creatine, sports science, muscle growth, recovery, performance, and human physiology, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because understanding the science behind performance will always outperform supplement marketing.